Welcome to the WagerTalk podcast for the week ending May 20th. We've got a big show tonight as we've got David Purdum with us. He'll be stopping by to discuss the landmark Supreme Court decision that came down on Monday. We're going to look at the NHL playoff and NBA playoff matchups for this weekend with Ralph Michaels and Dave Koken, who are in studio with me. We'll also take a look at three big baseball games over the weekend. And we'll have a best bet at the end of the show from all of us, three best bets to finish up the show. Mark Seidel is behind the controls, making sure we sound good. And I'm your host, Marco D'Angelo. Let's get the party started. And, guys, on Monday, the Supreme Court ruled 6-3 to strike down the Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act that was there since 1992, law that barred state-authorized sports gambling with some exceptions. And let's bring in a noted expert on the gambling scene. He writes for various publications, of course, ESPN, and he covers the betting market and things happening. David Purdum, thank you for joining us. Welcome to the show, and I guess you've been in high demand this week.
It has been a pretty eventful, busy week, and it should be. I mean, this is a historic moment in the U.S. sports. Really, it brings the U.S. Kind of catches us up a little bit with some of the international jurisdictions that have had sports betting legalized for a long time. So we're finally caught up and ready to go now.
Now, for our listeners that, may not be aware, they've had to been living under a rock, explain to them what this actually means, because you've been covering this story for a few years. New Jersey is a state that has been pushing for this and, of course, will be the first one to the betting window, so to speak. Tell the viewers what's coming.
So we just got a breaking news story here just a second ago. It sounds like Delaware may try to jump in front of New Jersey and be the first one to go full-blown sports betting. Delaware has had an NFL lottery kind of small-scale thing for quite a while. But their governor just released a statement and said that they find no legal obstacles in their way, and they're going to be trying to be up and running in the 1st of June. So that might beat New Jersey to the window, which is a little funny since New Jersey kind of made this all happen. They deserve most of the credit here, if not all. They pushed the sports leagues and battled them and spent $8 million in legal fees over the last 6 years. They lost every step of the way during that process until last June. Last June was the big, huge turning point. The Supreme Court decided to take the case. As soon as that happened, everybody started switching their opinion and saying suddenly New Jersey was the favorite. That turned out to be true. And like you said, New Jersey pulled off a huge victory on Monday and setting the stage for a state-by-state expansion of sports betting in the U.S.
Well, Delaware obviously had the edge because they allowed you could bet a 3-team parlays on teams. Mm-hmm. So with the infrastructure and the windows, they obviously would be set up to go originally. Besides New Jersey, what do you think will be the next states to follow after that?
Mississippi, I think, will be probably the next one. They've said that they can probably be up and running within a couple months, so sometime this summer. West Virginia is another one that seems poised to move pretty quickly. They have legislation already in place. So West Virginia, Delaware, New Jersey, and Mississippi are probably going to be your first four to start off with. I wouldn't be surprised if New York doesn't act pretty quickly. They've got a bill advancing through. Their legislative session ends kind of mid to late June, so they might try to push something through the beginning. But we'll definitely have 4 or 5 states operating ahead of NFL season. Dave,
there are flies in every ointment. And I want to talk about one potential fly in the ointment here. And it's it figures. The guy who was probably at the forefront of the 1992 bill was Orrin Hatch. He's retiring. But before he leaves, he wants to screw this up as well. He's going to push for federal regulation. And I think he's probably going to get the colleges and maybe a couple of leagues to align with him, which makes this a possibility. Now, what makes that a problem is it could impact the way we've done business here in Nevada. If it's federally regulated and they decide to set their own rules, which might include some kind of an integrity fee, this is potentially scary news for Nevadans.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. If this would have stayed at the state-by-state level, other states just legalized it would have had very little impact on Nevada in terms of their current scheme. Senator Hatch has said he is planning legislation at the federal level. The NFL and him have had discussions. Mm-hmm. Today, the NCAA said it also supports federal legislation, so I got to think they've been in the discussions as well. And that's the biggest scary part for me, is I think the NCAA may try to pitch some kind of carve-out that would prohibit states from taking bets on college sports. And if it's a federal legislation, that definitely could impact Nevada, and we know how popular betting on college sports in Nevada is. So that is something to be very concerned about for sure.
As an expert on this, would you say that indicates that it's really of paramount importance to get as many states legalizing it already before this has a chance to get passed through the House and Senate? Because I would think the more states that already have it in place, the more resistance there would be to federal regulation.
Yeah, absolutely. Several people, the American Gaming Association as well, has kind of made that point. More states that get set up and everything, it'll make it more and more difficult for a federal legislation to be set and make them kind of unwind all those state laws that have already been put in place. So, I think we're kind of in a crucial period here. Next couple months, we'll see what happens. Senator Hatch is going to retire at the end of this session. The legislation goes all the way through December. But as you guys know, Congress doesn't move exactly lightning quick these days. So they're going to really have to rush something through during that next 6 months. A lot of the state legislatures are already shut down. So it's going to be crunch time for some people to try to get their act together and just hopefully we'll work through it all and everybody will take the logical steps to this and make it work. We're creating a brand new market, a $100 billion plus market, and there's going to be some mistakes made surely along the way. Hope we can just all stay rational about it and fix those mistakes and move forward.
What scares me is that we've got a president, Bill Frist, one of the all-time government pain in the asses. His parting shot was to attach the internet bill, which basically prohibited online sports betting. He attached it to a very important port security bill that had to get passed. It was a really important bill. It had nothing whatsoever to do with port security, but he managed to attach it anyway. These guys are tricky, and I can see someone like Hatch doing the same thing before he leaves office to try and get this pushed through. I'm really worried about this, as you can tell.
Yeah, I am too. It's going to be very interesting. I was hoping to learn more today about what exactly they think needs to be in this federal framework. There are sources telling us that the NFL is not necessarily focused on any sort of integrity fee, so that's good. They are looking for data rights, but again, I think the college, any kind of college carve-out is something also to be worried about.
Well, Dave, I know already when I read some West Virginia things, West Virginia was already ready to share capital with Marshall and the University of West Virginia as far as gaming capital or gaming profit. Mm-hmm. But, if you had to give us, I don't want to put you on a spot, and since Dave Koken's the bearer of bad news and putting a gloom on all this,
I'm just trying to, while everybody's, this is great, it isn't great yet.
Give us your percentage out of 100. Nothing will happen in Nevada. There'll be a national mandate, or Nevada will get grandfathered. Those three options.
In terms of college betting?
In terms of the college betting, yes.
In terms of the college betting, let me think here. That's a tough one. Oh, my gosh. Let's be clear here. I do not know that the NCAA is going this. They declined comment, and when I asked them today, are you guys going to pursue a carve-out for college sports? So that doesn't make me feel good that they declined comment. If they go and try to get it done, I'm going to make them the underdog because I think they're going to get serious pushback. So I'm going to get put to underdog. I'm going to say a college carve-out federally that would impact Nevada is probably a 5-1 dog.
Oh, good.
Dave, today the NCAA did say that they were going to change their stance on having championship games played in states that have wagering. So that's a good step in the right direction. But, I mean, my God, it should have been already.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a long time coming. We already had bowl games and conference tournaments, and now we're having a lot of regular season college basketball games in Las Vegas, too. So, obviously, now with it being legalized, they would be really reduced to the amount of states eventually that they could hold. You may be down to everything being held in Utah. I heard some people joke today because Utah is probably one of the last states, if they ever decide to legalize sports betting. Utah would absolutely be the last. So, long time coming, logical move for them for sure.
And with the new Raider Stadium coming here, it's going to be a showpiece that people would want to come here and see that stadium. Come to the town. It's a town that's we know it's the greatest tourist town in the country. Everybody wants to do it, and that would be a win for everybody, in my opinion. Dave, a couple last questions I want to ask you because there are some other concerns here. Do you see? Is this going to be? Where will these sports betting take place? Is it going to be tied to brick and mortar places? We saw like several years ago, whenever the slot machines came in, they were basically at all of the racetracks and such. Is there going to be limitations there? And will they be able to come with mobile apps, which we know here in Vegas are so popular and obviously would give them a quick, in to tie themselves to somebody that already knows what they're doing and can supply them a skin of their product and have them flying right out of the gate?
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to start brick and mortar. I'm going to speak specifically to New Jersey here with the racetracks. William Hill, of course, is going to be a big player in New Jersey. They're going to be at Monmouth Park, and it will be brick and mortar to start off. As soon as they get the legislation put in place, the legislation will allow for mobile betting, and that legislation is supposed to be put in place and signed by the governor, early to mid-June. But once they get that put in place, they'll have to probably, approve the technology, approve the apps, and those will get going. So eventually we will have mobile wagering, and I would assume we'll have mobile wagering in almost every state that legalizes it. In fact, every bill that I've read, to the best of my knowledge, and if I missed one or two that didn't acknowledge it, they at least address some form of mobile wagering, like eventually we want to get there. So ultimately, we all know this is all going to end up online through mobile.
I mean, New Jersey already has mobile gambling where you could play blackjack or slot machines online, so I'm sure that's going to be the next step for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dave, if I had to ask you, where do you think the VIG's going to be on taking straight bets here when this gets into all of the states? Will we see the traditional minus 110, or do you think that everybody's going to have their hand out along the way and force the casino operators, sportsbook operators, to have to jack the juice up and be looking at minus 115s or minus 120s?
Yeah, you hear that concern a lot about, these extra fees that the leagues are trying to take out, and how will that be passed on to the consumer? Will it be done straight with the VIG? I don't think so. I don't think it'll be that blatant. I don't think you'll have to be laying minus 120 in New Jersey and only minus 110 in Las Vegas. I think they're going to all try to be competitive on straight bets. Where you might see it happen is in like the futures hold. Mm-hmm. The hold on the futures market might grow a little bit, or parlay payouts might be a little bit lower than normal. So they might try to take it out that way, but I just can't see them trying to, throw out minus 120 on some games when, it's readily available at minus 110 and even lower offshore and in Vegas. So I certainly hope they don't go that route when they're trying to, pass on the regulation, because there's going to be extra costs of regulation. We all understand that. And this is a business, and these businesses want to make money and want to have the best profit margin they can. But I think just the backlash, can you guys imagine if they start throwing out 120? People would be going crazy.
Oh,
so,
you can't win.
Let's certainly hope not.
You can't win. You can't. Minus 120. You do one other thing. From what I'm gathering, Nevada, this is obviously there's going to be books outside Nevada, but the infrastructure and the licensing is probably going to be heavily Nevada-based throughout the country. Is that right?
I think some of them are looking at the Nevada model. The tax rates in some of these other states have not followed. The tax rate in Nevada is 6.75% for sports betting win of the net profit for the books. I have not seen one nearly as low as that. New Jersey's, I believe, is 8 or 9%. Then you look at somewhere like Pennsylvania, they put up something like 36%.
I know. It's
6
insane.
times. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So.
Last question for you. With this passing, do you think this opens up the road for online poker as well, in the very near future?
Yes, I think that will be the next iteration that comes through. In fact, one of the federal bills that has already been introduced by Frank Pallone, a New Jersey Democrat, who has a chance to be the chairman of the House Energy and Commerce Committee in this next session. His bill that would legalize online poker. It would also place sports betting and fantasy sports in the same type of bill, so they would regulate it that way. And I'm personally for doing that way, regulating all this stuff in the same way, and not having these little carve-outs for skill-based games and so forth. So I just think that would be the more appropriate way. So to answer your question, yes, I do think online poker follows in the next couple of years.
Dave, Marco lied. This is the last question.
All right.
5 years, let's go 5 or 10 years down the road. Do you see states by states each running their own, or perhaps a William Hill type company taking over 10, 15, 20 states, paying a fee to the states to run it?
No, I don't think it'll ever have one book to run in one state. I think there will always be some sort of competition to prevent any kind of antitrust concerns. One thing I would, this is kind of my own vision that I think would be helpful. If the feds do get involved and we get 5-10 years down the road, maybe we have some sort of nationwide betting exchange, just like a stock market, just like a Betfair that they have in the UK. And maybe that's controlled by the feds, and maybe that's where the leagues kind of get their cut from. And then at a state level, we have more of the recreational or standard retail sports books. So that is just me speculating, but I thought that might, it might help you guys, you sharp guys out there that, need that liquidity. And some of these books that won't take the action of the sharper guys, if we had a nationwide exchange, we'd have a pretty big liquidity there so everybody could get action.
Yeah. By the way, last thing I want to add, and it's just an ad, not a question. Mark Cuban has already come out and said it, and he's right. The leagues don't need any fees. The franchise value of every professional sports team in America went up significantly with this bill's announcement. So unless they're just being pigs and we're willing to give in to them, they shouldn't get anything.
Well, I've kind of got a catchphrase about the leagues wanting money. Billion-dollar businesses, they like money, and they're going to try to get money. Yes. So we can criticize them for doing that, but it's not going to stop. They're always trying to get revenue.
But we should. But for those who are in Congress or in the Senate, they should at least understand the business model enough to be able to say to the leagues, "You're doing just fine. You've got enough. You're not getting any more from the taxpayers." That's my take on it.
Hey, Dave, appreciate you coming on board, and I really highly recommend our listeners following you on Twitter, David Purdum, at David Purdum, and it's a great follow. You want to know all of the stuff that happens in the betting world. I love every month whenever you send the tweets out where all the money's being made by the books, and every single month, those penny slots just keep bringing the money home for the bank.
The crack up is
yes, they do. Yes, they do. Well, thank you guys for having me on.
Hey, no problem. Sometime we got to do dinner, Dave, but we got to do it incognito. I hear some of your dinner things get a little bit of publicity.
Nobody that matters even cares about those. So.
I had to get one shot in. Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it, buddy.
You got it, guys. See you later.
All right, we're going to.
The funny thing on the penny slots is that the people around the country they have no idea what's going on, and they go, well, "How can that possibly be on pennies?" They're not playing at pennies. Okay.
They're playing max,
they're playing like $3. $3
it's $3
or whatever.
More than quarters.
Yeah. Right.
Absolutely. But hey, that's a secret for Vegas. We don't want to let that out. All right, guys, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to shift gears. It's been legal for a long time, betting horses, so we're going to talk about the Preakness here. And that was Dave.
No, it was Justify. He made a guest appearance.
He Mr. Ed.
All right, we'll be back.
Hello, Wilbur.
We'll be back in a moment. You guys don't want to know what's going on in studio today. We'll be right back. WagerTalk podcast.
It's Manic Monday, and that means every pick at WagerTalk.com is just $9. Get a play in any sport valued at up to $30 for just $9 each and every Monday at WagerTalk.com.
Welcome back to the Wager Talk podcast. We are going to head to the Preakness. It's the middle jewel of the Triple Crown. We've got Justify trying to carve his way into the record books, winning the Preakness. And we're going to bring in one of our regular contributors at Wager Talk, SIG Las Vegas. Let's bring SIG in now. SIG, how you doing?
Marco, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Hey, no problem. Wish you were in town and we could have had you in person, had you on some videos, and we'll see. We got a Triple Crown possibility coming up, and we'll tell our listeners they can follow you on Twitter at SIG Las Vegas. You pretty much put out some horse picks almost every day, and they can follow you there. And, of course, you do a lot of contributing writing for Wager Talk News, so we appreciate that. And let's ask you the first question. Justify, he finally broke the curse of Apollo. Are we looking at a Triple Crown champion in Justify?
I think it's a little premature to be asking that question, Marco. I mean, we have only had 12 Triple Crown winners since 1919. That's for the last 99 years. So it's been 37 years since a horse won a Triple Crown win. American Pharoah won it back in 2015. So that's a lot of pressure for a young horse that hasn't raced as a 2-year-old.
Well, he broke that curse of Apollo, and, I didn't have him in a Derby, full disclosure, but I did use him on my tickets because I wasn't going to have him, run me over and kill me in, my tries and exactas. I tried to beat him with Good Magic in that race, and Mendelssohn, I think he got hit again in the stall. I mean, he got hit 3 times out of the gate before they hit the first turn.
Just
he
before
just
we came
out in the paddock on a practice today.
Well, yeah, I just saw him before the show started. He just crossed the finish line about 8 minutes ago.
Thanks, Dave. Dave,
nice
still. That's like the second shot Dave got out in me today. Just because I wanted to sell his pick in the parking lot the other day for $1. He's been holding that against me, but. Okay, but honestly, Sig, you look at what Justify did, and I said that if he got through the Derby, I felt that we were definitely going to be looking come that Saturday in June at a possible Triple Crown, because I thought that he would be a slam dunk for the Preakness, and I'm going to still stay by that. Obviously, the Belmont's a whole different story, but I think we are looking at a horse that is going to get the term, and this is in the kindest, this is the highest compliment that you can give a horse, is this horse is a freak. And he's done everything asked of him, and what impressed me the most of the Derby, and I'll ask you, is not only did he get over all the humps that we talked about, he hadn't raced anywhere other than Santa Anita and all of that, the curse of Apollo, but the fractions that were set in the Derby, he was right there with that horse setting what was basically suicide fractions. And Bob Baffert said after the race that, when he looked up and saw 45-3, he wasn't feeling real good being sitting right there at that number, and yet the horse still ran off.
Right, very true. They had suicide fractions early. It was, I believe, 22-3 and 45-7 on the first quarter and first half mile. And he sat just off that early pace. Promises Fulfilled went out to the front in the Derby, as we saw, and was as expected. And Justify sat just off of him, and Good Magic sat just off of Justify. And you saw in the backstretch that both of them made their move in the second turn, and Justify just never gave any ground up. Once he made his move, he took the lead and never gave ground to Good Magic, never gave ground to anyone. The only one that was coming late was Audible, who's not running on Saturday, so we will have to wait till the Belmont to see what he does.
Sig, Ralph here. The question for a novice like me is, watching the Derby, looking at those numbers, knowing that it was with a sloppy track, how do you translate those numbers into what should be a dry track on Saturday?
Well, the best way I think to look at it is if you look at the past performance, Justify's run on both fast tracks and tracks considered sloppy and muddy in previous races, and he's never had a problem with any surface. So, I mean, he's basically done most of his running out west, except for the Churchill surface in the Derby a couple weeks ago. But Pimlico will be a different surface, and basically I've heard reports that they've seen a guy named Noah building a very large boat near Baltimore this week.
Yeah.
So it is going to be a complete mud bog, I believe, come Saturday afternoon about 6:50 when they run the Preakness.
That won't bother the partiers in the infield at Pimlico. They're a different breed, I'll tell you that. SIG, we've seen the change in the guard in the Kentucky Derby where all those years we had the favorite didn't win. And then now in the last 5-6 years, it's been the favorite winning the Derby every year. And we contributed that to the change in the point system in how they grade the points in to get in there. They take a lot of the sprint races don't have the same points that they used to have before. And it changed it. But what we've also seen now is in the Preakness, we're not seeing, this used to be the one race where they did run true to form. You had the favorites running 1-2 in the race, and you had generally your smallest payouts. But the last couple of years, that has not been the case. Even if we've had the favorite win, we've had some monsters run second that have given great payouts. Do you see that trend continuing on Saturday?
I think Saturday's going to be interesting. I mean, I have Justify on top because I can't see anyone in this field. The newcomer's the one that I see can beat him in this race. I think we may see a small regression from the second-place Derby runner, Good Magic, who was my top choice on Derby Day, just because he's never run on 2 weeks' rest, and this is his fourth race of the season. So I don't think we're going to see him come up and run second to Justify again on Saturday. I could be wrong, and I will use him in the second spot on my exacta tickets. But a newcomer to the Triple Crown races this time is Quip, who won the Tampa Bay Derby and ran second to Good Magic in the Bluegrass at Keeneland back in April, skipped the Derby, and he's had 5 weeks off to rest up, refresh, and train for this spot here at the Preakness. So I actually had a Derby future on Quip and was hoping to see him run, was disappointed that he didn't run, but I think they have him primed for this spot on Saturday. I definitely see him running possibly second or third under Justify on the card.
For people that don't know it, Quip is owned by the same owners, the same group as Justify. So a lot of people really, wonder, why would you want to run your horse against a possible Triple Crown horse? Well, breeding is as much of horse racing as anything else. And if Justify does go on and win the Triple Crown, and Quip is able to run second to him in one of the Triple Crown races, that raises his stock immensely. And Windstar Farm is one of the owners, so obviously the breeding part of it is very important to them. So I think that is why they made the decision to go ahead and run in this race. SIG, when handicapping any race, pace is a part of the handicapping. And even though there is speed in the Preakness, and Justify can go either way. He can go to the front or he could set off the lead. I don't think anybody really wants to go with him. And by default, he may end up on the front end in this race. How do you see the pace setting up?
He very well may end up on the front of the race, and that was one of the keys actually in the Derby was he never had dirt kicked in his face, and he hasn't yet in any race because he's been either right on the pace or setting the pace or right off the pace. On Saturday, though, I think there's a very good chance that you're going to see an early speed battle between possibly Sporting Chance, who ran in the Pate Mile on Derby Day, Quip, the newcomer we just discussed, and a Steve Asmussen trainee, Tenfold, who's only making the fourth start of his career. But they're all horses that like to set the pace early in a race.
Is there any long shots that you like in this race?
I mean, as we previously discussed, Quip is a favorite horse of mine. I don't know if you call 12-1 a long shot, but based on being justified at 1-2, and nobody wants to bet a 1-2 horse, even me. I like Quip at 12-1. The two longer shots that I like are both 20-1 on the morning line. The previously mentioned Tenfold and Bravazzo, who finished sixth in the Derby, which I was actually very impressed at. He went off at 67-1. And he had a nice sixth-place run in the Derby. He was actually up to fourth at the top of the stretch and tailed off a little bit to the horses that came charging down the stretch.
I'm glad that you picked that horse because Ralph and I did videos today, and I mentioned that horse. And I tell you all the time that I am a big handicapper from by the eye and watching the horses race. And too often when people bet a race, say they only concentrate on the horse that they bet. That's where their eyes are watching that race. And then they never go back and watch the race again. I go back and watch these key races again, and I look at the different horses and look at the trips they had. If you go back to the Derby and watch the trip that Bavazzo had, he was 4 and 5 wide in both of the turns. He was outside the entire race, but when he was in the turns, he was extremely wide. He finished 6th, beat by 8 lengths. Was he going to win that race? No. But if he had an inside trip and was close, saved all that ground that he gave up in the wide turns, he would have not lost by 8 lengths. He would have been much closer, which would have got him on the board for the, at least the trifecta. So I do have Bravazzo. The other horse that had some trouble in the Derby is if you go back and look at Lone Sailor. He was trapped down along the rail, and he never could give the horse his head. He had a dead horse in front of him and a horse to the outside of him, and he kind of just, I think, choked the life out of the horse. So I think you're going to see a big run by Lone Sailor. He is basically the lone stone-cold closer in the race, and a lot of people don't look at the Preakness as a race for closers, but the last couple of years, it has been a closer that's come in at a big number to give the ticket price. So some interesting horses there. Last question for you. Friday, the Black-Eyed Susan. Do you have anything for our listeners there that you like? You want to just give them some numbers and a horse on top?
Well, my preview is up on the WagerTalk news site right now, but the horse that I'm looking at in the Black-Eyed Susan tomorrow is Sarah Street. She came in second in the Gazelle back at Aqueduct last month, and the field here does not look that tough. I'm sorry. The only horse that's coming in from the Kentucky Oaks is Coach Rocks, and she didn't have the best trip, and she doesn't seem like she wants to win a race here. But Sarah Street looks fresh. She's coming in here off second-place finish in the Gazelle, and I see her taking down the Black-Eyed Susan tomorrow afternoon.
What is she at morning line?
She's 4-1 morning line. Coach Rocks was set at 7-2, so a slight favorite, but
I'll take 4-1. That's $10. We'll take that.
If we keep 4-1, I'll be happy. I'll be at the window all day.
All right. Hey, thanks for joining us. And again, follow SIG Las Vegas on Twitter, and you can check out his work at WagerTalk.com in the news section. We'll talk to you soon, Sig.
Great. Thanks, Marco.
All right, guys, we're going to take a break. Enough about talking about horses and what's happening in the betting world. We're going to talk about bets that we can make right now, and that is the NHL playoffs and the NBA Eastern and Western Conference Finals. That's up next, WagerTalk.com.
Every Tuesday, WagerTalk.com offers a best bet selection from its hottest handicapper. It's a great way to introduce yourself to WagerTalk.com with a big best bet winner for just $2 on $2 Tuesday.
Welcome back to the Wager Talk podcast. We've got hockey finals, basketball conference finals, and Dave, this town is nuts. The NBA was going on last night. I actually had a wager on the NBA game with the Rockets, and I didn't watch any of it. I got to tell you, I was glued to the TV with the Knights in Winnipeg. What a game. What a performance by my guy.
Guess who?
Marc-Andre Fleury. Yes, I have a man crush on him, but those two saves late in the game, I mean, just unreal. Where do we go now, Game 4?
Well, and here's the problem for Winnipeg. Fleury's starting again in Game 4. Okay. He is, if they were to give out the Conn Smythe, which is the most valuable or most outstanding playoff performer, based on the action to date, he would get every vote. He'd be unanimous. And anybody who wouldn't vote for him at this point is like, you haven't been watching. That starts to wear on a team after a while. It's like, what the hell do we do here? Look, the Golden Knights played well the first two periods in Game 3. But they were completely outplayed in Game 4. In the third period of Game 3. And it didn't matter because they got one puck past Fleury early and made it 3-2. And he just wasn't letting anything else in. I mean, the guy's he's diving back across the crease and making saves with his arm. He is so hot right now. It's almost scary. And he's just as loose as can be. I mean, there's a scrum taking place, a little bit of a battle after puck gets tied up, and there's a little scrapping going on, and he's got Wheeler in front of him, and he's tickling the guy on his ear. He is having a great time out there. To me, there's two things you can't do right now. You can if you want, but I'm not going to. I'm not betting against Fleury, and I'm not going to take it over. He's just too good right now.
Well, they got the over last night with 2.7 seconds left on an empty netter.
It was an under game that happened to go over because of a goal with empty net goal with 2 seconds to go. To me, it's a tough bet because now you got to lay a price with the Golden Knights. The numbers crunchers will probably come in on Winnipeg in this game, but they'll be overwhelmed in the overall betting specter by the number of tickets and monies that will show on Vegas as far as the game is concerned. Money line, puck line, series line. They're not getting any bets at all on Winnipeg as far as that goes. I'll be a spectator. I mean, the spot here is Winnipeg. But this Golden Knights team, and I know I've said it, this is old news. All they've done is destroy good spots for the other team all season long. And at some point you have to learn it's like this team isn't normal. And you have to act accordingly. To me, if you want to play the Golden Knights, or if you want to play the Jets, rather, wait for Game 5 when they get back home. Either way, I think they might be a good bet out of the gate in Game 5, particularly if they're down 3-1. Then you'll really get a big effort in the first period of Game 5. Outside of that, though, I can't play anything here.
It's going to be crazy if this town gets a Stanley Cup final here, and God forbid if they win, the party to see Lord Stanley strolling down that cup going down Las Vegas Boulevard, it would be insane here.
Biggest upset of all time if it happens. It is the big. By the way, the silliest thing I saw was something on Twitter. What's bigger, Miracle on Ice or Golden Knights winning the Stanley Cup? It's like the Miracle on Ice was like they were $450.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, they weren't even a big underdog. It was a bigger story from the sense of, they beat the Russians, but they were never that big of an underdog anyway in that game. So the Golden Knights were as high as 500 to 1. I mean, it's not close.
How bad? We talked to a lot of bookmakers on our radio show, The Daily Show. It's not going to be a good outcome for them if this happens in the Golden Knights win.
Some better than others, or some less damaging than others. I know. I don't want to mention names, but I know that one major book in town maybe has like an $80,000 liability total, which isn't really a drop in the bucket. It's 7 figures at other locations, so it really depends on what the number they hung up and how much action they got early at that number.
Marco, Dave and I on the radio earlier today talked to CG Technologies, and they had said that.
Well, yeah, they mentioned it, so
right.
Go ahead
it's the money that they're losing is one thing, but the handle they're bringing in from hockey is helping them all around. So there is a trade-off there. It's volume to a degree that's going to carry over year in and year out for a season now. So at that point, you can handle a little bit of a loss in this situation.
But the thing is, though, and I'm not knocking what they said, but you got to take it with a grain of salt because they probably have less liability in the Golden Knights than anybody in town.
Yeah.
They hung a lower good odds making. They hung a lower number to begin with and didn't get all those quote unquote recreational bets on the Golden Knights where people wanted to just take a shot. So that was smart bookmaking. They have less liability, so naturally this is a win-win for them.
Right.
Funner to watch the Knights now.
But you got to think that even the books that are in trouble, it did increase their handle for the. They didn't just bet the Knights. That as the season progressed and they got more into hockey. I mean, anywhere you go, every bar, people, they're not only watching, they're talking. They've learned the game very quickly. And I've never been involved with an expansion club before. Obviously, I've never seen anything like this. And the combination of it being
actually nobody has.
I do. I have the Browns. So
they've
been an expansion team the last 15 years.
All right.
I do have one more thing about the Knights is that, Winnipeg played a great third period. You saw their speed come out. You saw how talented they were. But if you watch the game and you watched them pander the players at the end of the game, you saw desperation. You saw how depressed they were. Even that empty netter just hurt them a little bit more. So, I mean, that goes a long way to carry over. Now they have one off day. They're in Vegas. They have to come back, face this incredible home crowd again. It's silly to say that an empty net goal can set the precedence for the next game, but in my mind, it really did.
I think it's more the fact that they just got completely frustrated by. The saves he had in the third period last night were that's not possible. What he just did, and he did it.
The final 2.5 minutes when they kept trying to pull, they were trying to get the goalie off the ice. But the Knights kept.
They did a great job late.
They kept the puck in their end that he couldn't come off. I mean, he sat there for a minute not being able to come off.
It was the fourth line, the Reeves line. Okay, Ryan Reeves has really played. He's playing the best hockey of his career. Right. Doesn't score up in the score sheet. He has never played this well. That fourth line, when it really mattered last night, was the best line on the ice.
It was, Dave, and I've said this on another show that I do, that when you look at the Knights lines, every hockey team has their 4 lines, and there's the 1, the 2, the 3. There's a drop off on each one. That's why they're called the first, second, third, fourth line. With the Golden Knights, there is not that same drop off from the first line
to the
secret
all year, Marco.
Yeah, that is the thing. They don't have like that super elite number 1 line, but their 2, 3, and 4 are very, very close, and that is an edge that they have over everybody that they play.
There's no question about it. And by the way, speaking of Reeves, did you see the hit he laid on one of the Jets guys last night? I thought he was going to break the boards.
Absolutely.
And it was a legal hit, too.
But the last thing I'm going to say on the third period, other than the last 2 minutes of the game when it went helter-skelter, I think the Knights, because Fleury's playing so well, I think they got too defensive and stopped attacking because – like you said, even the Knights are looking at this and saying nothing's going past him, that a 1-goal lead is all you need. And I think they got a little bit too conservative playing in their, they played most of the third period in their own end, and that cannot happen again. And that's the one thing. Everything that, if they have made one mistake, Gallant has addressed it.
Oh, he's just
phenomenal.
He's
in between games.
Their adjustments from one game to the next throughout the season have been amazing. This is the easiest Coach of the Year decision in sports history.
Yeah. Going to the NBA, let's start, Ralph, with your Cleveland Cavaliers, 6.5-point favorites.
You notice he says that every time they get smoked.
Well, I did it 16 times last football season, too. But you're down 0-2. And, when Dave and I did the show this weekend, a lot of people, were looking to take the Cavs. And I said, how many people are going to walk to the window just because it's Cleveland, they're down 0-1, and say, LeBron's not going to go down 0-2, and they were going to bet Cleveland blindly. It looked good for the first half. But once again, this Boston Celtic team, they're amazing at what they're doing. And Cleveland did not look good in either game.
No, and even Boston's been that way at home. I mean, there's such a home-road dichotomy from the Celtics. On the road, you have to remember, they've only covered 2 playoff games. They've only won 1 playoff game outright on the road, and that was Philadelphia in overtime. The other cover was Milwaukee Milwaukee was a 2-point loss in the game they covered. Cleveland's now a 180 dog in the series. Boston's minus 220. You're coming back to Cleveland. You have a Boston team that doesn't play well on the road. And just let's put it in perspective. LeBron has not gotten the help from his outside, his others, as they called them on the Saturday Night Live skit. When Clarkston is your third leading scorer getting 10 points per game, you're in trouble. But it's still LeBron. It's still, you have the next 2 games at home. He still has won 23 straight Eastern Conference playoff series, and Boston is still a bad road team. I expect Cleveland to win the next 2 games, go back to Boston. It's a 3-game series, and while Boston has the better young athletic athletes and basketball players, there's some pressure when it's a 3-game series tied at 2-2.
How many series in a row was that?
23 straight Eastern Conference
23
series.
straight.
Yep.
Well, you know what? Next season, whenever LeBron's not there, and if they do make the playoffs, you could say 23-1's not bad. Moving on to the next one, we got the Warriors and
You know what Dave's opinion on Cleveland?
Dave, do you have anything to say on Cleveland?
Well, I do remember a night after a Barons game that I spent at a place called Young's Cafe that was not far from the old Municipal Auditorium in Cleveland, which, by the way, was an absolutely horrible place to watch a game. Young's Cafe had some interesting attractions, though. I was like 18 at the time. That's all I remember. That's what I can tell you about Cleveland.
Somehow I don't think you went. I don't think you went there for food, did you?
No, I still remember her name too. At least she said it was Tanya.
Okay.
We regress.
Let's go to the.
Well, you wanted me to talk about Cleveland.
That's it.
So, I have a better grasp of that particular event than I do of anything in the current city of Cleveland, except for the baseball team.
All right, and we will be talking about a Cleveland game in the baseball section. Going to the Western Conference Finals that many believe are the NBA Finals. This is, team wins this one is the team that's going to be the champion. You look at Golden State. They go into Houston in that game one, made a statement. We talked about it, Houston all year. They made a point. They wanted that number one seed, and they played for it. They got it. And then 48 minutes later, first game of the Western Conference Finals, they don't have the number one seed anymore. They lost home court advantage. A lot of people were writing them off, saying, where do they go from now? And, boy, did they respond with a big game in Game 2, Dave.
I didn't see a second of it
either. You know what? I didn't either because I was watching the Knights. But
and again, I'll just mention this because for people who didn't listen last week, I have, from a handicapping standpoint, I have retired from the NBA. I'm not doing it anymore. I don't feel I have a good handle in the league, and consequently, I'm paying very little attention to it. So when we talk about it on the radio, I usually defer to whoever is following it closer than I am. I'm not going to bullshit about it. I couldn't care less what happens in the NBA at this point. I'm going to focus on the hockey and the baseball.
The Game 2, I was on the Rockets, and the reason I was on the Rockets, and I talked to you about this on the show earlier, Dave, when the zigzag theory, we know it's a 50% play, but the zigzags that have been working have been the ones that it looks tough to take that team. Nobody really wanted Houston after Golden State.
Maybe that was a good sign to take them.
Yeah, that's why I went with the zigzag there, and they responded. Ralph, how do you see Golden State responding going back to Oakland?
It was nice to see Houston perform, but you have to remember, Houston had the best record for a reason. They are talented. They are deep. They've got a lot of young players that learned to play together this year. So, when I look at Golden State and you see Curry shooting 1 of 8 from 3-point land, he's not going to do that back at home. Golden State at home, you mentioned it in videos today. Golden State plays playoff defense, which is something is surprising to a lot of people that aren't NBA fans that don't normally watch this game. You see Golden State scoring in the 220s, allowing 210 points, and you don't think a team can play defense. Well, you can play good defense when you're playing up-tempo. You're still allowing a very good percentage. It's just, a team like Utah may allow 48% shooting, but they only allow 95%. And people translate points per game allowed to being good defense. Well, that's not true. If you're playing at a higher place, you could play a very good defense and still allow 200 points per game. And that's where I think you see Golden State come to fruition. Houston shot over 51%. I think you have a stat on that a little later. And Curry will not shoot 1 of 8 from three-pointers. You have 4, again, I've mentioned this numerous times, you have 4 all-star players. You have 2 Hall of Famers playing on the same team. Golden State's going to get it done for the series, and I think Golden State gets it done in Game 3. But I think Houston can keep it close enough where I won't be playing the Warriors.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to look at the total for Game 3. And the thing that I'm looking at, the Warriors allowed over 50% one time so far in the playoffs, and that was the loss to the Pelicans. The next game, the Pelicans shot 36% in that game, and it was a 26-point blowout. I think that I'm not saying it's going to be a 26-point blowout, but what I'm going to say is they're going to play lockdown defense. And a couple stats on the under, then I'll come to you, Ralph. Houston 9-1 to the under in road games after they play a game where the combined score is 215 or more back-to-back games, and Houston 7-0 to the under in road games after playing 3 straight at home. Both of those line up perfectly for this, and if I expect Golden State to come out with fire in their eyes and play defensively after they got torched in Game 2, I'm going to look to the under.
Listen, some people have their thoughts about Steve Kerr, but when you look at coaches that make adjustments, Steve Kerr has been to the NBA Finals how many straight years? He knows how to adjust his team after a loss. In that situation, that's something new for Houston.
All right, guys, that's going to wrap up this segment. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to take a look at baseball. We've got 3 games in baseball, and Dave will actually have some stuff to say about the baseball.
Yes, I will.
And we've got a couple good pitching matchups going. We'll be right back on the Wager Talk podcast. Welcome back to the Wager Talk podcast. We're heading into the home stretch. We've got 3 weekend baseball games for you. And then after that, what you wait for, the best bet section. That'll finish up the show tonight. Let's head to the Diamond. We're going to go to Friday night baseball. And we've got Cleveland at Houston. Good matchup. This is one of the matchups that, people thought we might be seeing later in the year, playoff time. You've got the Indians. They're going to send Clevenger to the mound. And Houston sends Charlie Morton to the mound. And another ex-Pirate on the Houston Astros staff is Mark just smiles over there with Cy Young, Garrett Cole, lining up to get that trophy this year. Dave, I'm going to come to you. You are Mr. Baseball. Yeah, I know
it's Cleveland. You're supposed to start with Ralph.
Yeah, you had the basketball game. You got to suffer with LeBron. You look at this Houston team, Dave. The pitching that they are getting right now is absolutely incredible. The pitching staff has allowed the opposition 3 runs or less in 10 straight games. You're not going to lose a lot of baseball games when you're throwing like that.
Dallas Keuchel's their number 5 starter.
Started the season, the number 2 starter?
Well, but he's, that's your 5.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just insane how good this staff is. And they really have been somewhat inconsistent with the bats. They're just a really, really good baseball team. There are some concerns of the Indians right now. I think it was just rust, but Andrew Miller was really bad against the Tigers the other night. I mean, really bad. The pitches he put in the strike zone got ripped, and those were the only pitches he put in the strike zone. He was walking guys all over the place. I think he walked 3 guys. I mean, it was a terrible performance. It was just his second off the DL, so you got to hope, if you're an Indians fan, it's rust. But this is the problem right now is the Indians' bullpen, which was considered to be a major strong point coming into the season. You had guys, it wasn't just Miller and Allen. You had McAllister off a good season last year. Otero was really good last year. These guys aren't pitching at nearly the same level they were a season ago. And the Indians are not a sure thing to hold on to leads right now. That's a problem here. Because even if they match up with Houston in the starting pitching front, which is not inconceivable. I mean, they got some good arms on this Cleveland squad. I mean, Clevenger still has command issues every now and then, but these guys pitching pretty good ball. The problem is, what do you do in the last 3 innings? Because right now, Terry Francona can't have as much confidence as he would like in the Indians' bullpen, and I don't think the team has as much confidence as they would like in the Indians' bullpen. It's supposed to be a major strength, and it's turned into a bit of a liability. That's a big problem for them in this series, and it's a big problem for them in this matchup because Charlie Morton is not likely going to give up much while he's out there.
You know, Dave, you said it a few weeks ago when Miller went on the DL. It was only the 10-day DL, and you said that watch out because not only does Miller not be there, it changes everyone else in the back end of the rotation. And since that time, they have not been the same. In fact, the first day Miller went out, in the 8th inning, it was tied 4-4 against Seattle. They gave up the winning run in the 8th, and then the next day they lost again. So, I mean, there's been 4 or 5 losses that I know of from the bullpen because of Miller on that 10-day DL.
It's one of the arguments I have with a lot of the analytics guys, and I know from a mathematical standpoint, what they're saying is correct. In that, well, it doesn't really matter who you're closing the game with. It's still 3 outs, and they might not even be facing the toughest 3 guys. That might go to the 7th inning or 8th inning guy. And they're right from a mathematical and logical standpoint. But sports aren't about math and logic all the time. And bullpen guys really need to be in defined roles for the most part. There are exceptions, but for the most part, they're creatures of habit who need to follow the same pattern game after game. And when you take a key guy out of the bullpen mix, it often has a domino effect on the rest of the bullpen. It has in Cleveland.
Normally, I would say in a situation like this, I would look to instead go first 5 innings, but you can't the way the Houston starting pitchers are, because they're going to outduel you, in the first 5 innings.
Well, unless Morton has he's had 2 games this year where his command's been a little bit off, and those, he walked people and he wasn't great. Great. Once every 4 or 5 starts, he has a tiny clunker. It's not even a game where he gets completely blown up. He's just not as good as he usually is. Outside of that, the guy's practically unhittable. Yeah, good luck if you're trying to beat these guys right now.
And you look at Clevenger. I'll go Ralph. He is a guy that can be really lights out, and as Dave said, he can have control issues and be walking people, and then all of a sudden falls apart. But for the month of May so far, he has been really, really good. Got an ERA of 2.91. The whip is even better, 0.97. He's not getting guys on base. And when he is pitching with command like that, and he's not giving up those free passes with the walks, this is a good pitcher. And, it's interesting to see Houston. It's tough to go against that pitching staff, but right now they're not scoring the runs that they scored last year.
They got some guys that are struggling.
You look at Clevenger, and to be as young as he is, and you look at him with his long hair and hanging off his jersey, and he's made 24 career road starts, and he's 10-5 with a 3.22 ERA. So to be that young and to learn how to win on the road and pitch well on the road is one statement. Now, granted, Mark and I may have a beer bet on this behind, with his Astros and with my Indians. And how could you not like Morton with a 4-0 record with a 1.96 ERA? But Houston is only 12-10 at home. That's one downside. Morton has allowed 5 home runs his last 36 innings, and the Indians are leading the major leagues in home runs. When you think of the Yankees, everyone thought the Yankees would be running away with it. The Indians have hit 64 home runs. They're 5 clear of everyone else in baseball, and the Yankees have only hit 58 home runs by comparison. So if they can get a few home runs off Morton and Clevenger keeps them in the game, I'm going to give them a fair shot.
Moving to Saturday, we've got Miami and Atlanta, and I know you guys had to, Ralph, you had to look and say, why did he put this one on the list? The reason I put it on the list was
I did, Marco.
I know you did, but this Atlanta ball club is a team that's flying under the radar for a lot of people. They're playing good baseball. This is a team, they're 7-2 their last 9 games. They're getting some good pitching. And one of the guys that are getting pitching from right now is a guy that couldn't buy a win at home last year, Julio Teheran. He's been dynamite, Dave. Yeah, what do you attribute the big change to?
Command. He's putting the ball where he wants to throw it. I mean, it doesn't matter. Velocity isn't that big if you can locate your pitches. And outside of one start where he had a bad back and had to come out of the game early, he was clearly uncomfortable in that game. That's, if you look at his velocity charts, that's the game where it was way down. It was like 84. He was just, he had nothing and tried to gut it out, and he couldn't do it. They took him out. But outside of that, I mean, he's a finesse guy at this point who has to locate. But he's doing a great job of it right now. And Atlanta's, for flying under the radar, they shouldn't be. Because when you look at, to me, one of the really good stats, really good indicator stats on a team is team OPS. You get a team that's up there among the leaders in OPS as a team, chances are they're going to be leaders in the standings as well. Atlanta is one of the best OPS producers in baseball. They're right near the top of the majors in that category. They're legitimate. The Acuna kid is sensational. Ozzie Albies is a dynamic young player. Freddie Freeman has finally got some talent around him. This team's, their one weakness to me, is the bullpen. I think the bullpen is something they're probably going to need to address. I don't think Vizcaino's a big pressure guy. Minter is impressive, but he does walk a lot of people. This is an area where, and it's not easy to find them, but I think Atlanta needs to be on the lookout for an arm, a really solid veteran arm to bolster the bullpen, because they are going to be in this race. And you don't want to be giving away games that you can probably win because of a weak bullpen.
The other stat, you talk about numbers of where they're at. If you played just $100 on every game, every team, all of their games, the team that would have made you the most money so far this year is the Atlanta Braves.
The anti-Dodgers?
The anti-Dodgers, yes. Oh, my God. And this will be the first weekend we don't have the Dodgers in a game. They didn't make the cut.
No, they're on the AAA version of the WagerTalk podcast, because that's the way they're playing.
Dave, when you get a pitcher like that's going for Miami, Urena, here's a guy he's not pitching bad, though.
No.
They're 0-9 in his 9 starts. And and Ralph, you do all of your first pitch stuff. Do you, when you see somebody that's just snake bit like that, do you look at the numbers of what he's actually doing, or, hey, this guy's snake bit, I'm not jumping in front of the snake bit?
Well, a 2.84 ERA his last 4 starts. I mean, so when you pitch back-to-back games like that and can't get a win, and Dave, you talked about this, it's almost that same situation where it can become draining. You're forced to pitch perfect because you're not going to get run support.
Well, you know what it is there is a progression coming for Urena, excuse me.
Okay.
The law of percentages based on the way he has performed almost demands that there's going to be a progression at some point. But the idea, and this is a lesson I learned a few years ago, I might have talked about it previously, but I'll mention it here. It's the Jeff Locke rule.
Yes.
Okay.
Another Pittsburgh Pirate.
Okay. This is the year that Locke made the All-Star team. He was absolutely terrible. I mean, his numbers were just hideous. His analytics, just awful. I mean, he was just screaming regression. It's like, this guy is the luckiest pitcher right now that I've ever seen, and he's going to start getting killed. And I was betting on that. The problem was he just kept getting lucky. And it wasn't really until after the All-Star break that he started to fade. In other words, his numbers caught up to his expected progression level. And then the next season, it's just like, this is a party. Because now, by this time, he's not getting lucky. The luck factor had run out. And he ended up in the minors the next year, okay? And was really never really heard from to any significant notion again. This is a year after being an All-Star. If Jeff Locke or anybody's family members are listening, I don't mean this to be insulting, but he's the worst All-Star of all time. He is. He had no business being here. He just had this lucky run. So how that ties into Urena and the Marlins is, I know there's a progression coming because he's throwing the ball too well to keep losing like this. But until he gets that first game where there's an actual buy sign, where it's like, okay, he finally won one, he should start to get some others now. It's either fade or pass, and I'll be passing.
Dave, that's just a point for our novice bettors here, because a lot of people watch a game or they read what someone says or they read some tweets. This person should regress or this person should perform better. Wait until that happens before you make that bet. Don't assume he's going to do it the next start.
The most you're going to miss out on is one bet.
One start, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, but there's guys, and I see it all the time. They keep on. I'll give you an example. The regression guy this year, as much as anybody early. Well, there's been a few. But Chad Bettis immediately comes to mind because he's the Rockies' right-hander, and it's like this isn't supposed to be happening. If you look at what he's doing from an analytics standpoint, it's like this is not supposed to be happening. And people kept on betting against him, and guess what? That's happened. Now, he keeps on winning. He finally lost his last start and wasn't good. So now you might see the regression start to actually happen. I didn't play it. We're doing this Thursday night, and he's actually pitching tonight for the Rockies. But I wouldn't be surprised if he gets knocked around again tonight. We'll see.
Now, I'm not using this game, but what I am using, I'm not using a side. I'm looking at the under in this one. And because he's pitched so well, not getting run support, and we talked of how well Tehran's playing, is pitching at home, which he couldn't do anything at home last year. And you got a right-hander. With Atlanta, we talked about it in an earlier segment, how they are hitting left-handers. They're averaging 6 runs a game against left-handers. They're not against right-handers. I'm going to take this one under the total, and I think it'll be one of those low-scoring games. And hopefully, for Urena's sake, he's finally on the right side of one of those low-scoring games.
I'm going to bring up 2 technicals about these teams, and I'm not going to say that I want to play Miami because of them. I just want to make you aware. The Braves are not used to being a favorite. When you are expected to beat a team, there's a different mentality. There's a different way you warm up. In fact, the Braves as a home favorite this year on the season are only 2-4. They've only been a home favorite 6 times, and they haven't won their last 3 games. You look at Miami. Miami on the road is 6-12. But with those 18 games, they are actually plus $20. So you're taking a 6-12 team, and you're making money, and you're taking an Atlanta team that's crushing it as a home favorite and losing money. So just be careful with those thoughts.
Most of that money came against the Dodgers.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, they finally lost to them today. Yeah. But the Marlins won that series, and I think they've got a little chip on their shoulders because everybody told them they were going to just suck beyond belief before the season started. They've been playing hard for Mattingly, and they're actually not the worst team in baseball.
No. Heading to Sunday, we've got Arizona. They're going to have Zach Greinke on the mound, and you got the New York Mets with Syndergaard. Ralph, Arizona, we talked at the beginning of the season how, we were surprised that we expected them to be better. We didn't expect them to get off to the start that they did. Everybody talked the Dodgers were going to run away with the division. And that opening series, they made a statement with the Dodgers, and they haven't looked back since. Until they've got this little losing streak going, but they're really not losing ground because nobody's playing good baseball. San Francisco's won some games, but they were so far back, and Colorado's been mediocre, and the Dodgers have just been playing pitiful.
I know you look at Arizona and you see Greinke on the mound, and you think, well, this is just an easy play, but I'm going to look at this game and I'm going to look at his starts. He's made 9 starts this year. Yes, his last 3 starts, he's only allowed 1 earned run or less. But of his 9 starts, 6 have been at home, only 3 on the road. His 6 starts at home, he's 2-0 with a 1.69. His 3 road starts, he has a 7.27 ERA. You look at Syndergaard, 3-1 on the year, a 3.14 ERA. 9 starts this year. Since opening day, he has not allowed over 3 earned runs in any starts so far this season. So, again, I know Greinke looks easy, but on the road, it's a situation where I think there may be some value with the Mets.
Yeah, I agree with you. With Greinke, he has always been that home-road dichotomy with him. He's always put up much better numbers at home than he has on the road. Syndergaard, as you said, has been sharp. Dave, do you like anything in this Arizona matchup with Syndergaard?
No, I think you're almost at a spot where both teams are kind of unplayable right now. The Diamondbacks can't hit. Okay, it's a problem for them. They've had the problem all year, and now their best offensive performer, A.J. Pollock, breaks his thumb, and he's going to be out for some time. The Mets started off 11-1. They've been just a bad team since then. And now Yoenis Cespedes gets hurt. He's their best performer. I don't know what to do with it. I don't know. The Mets are going to be overpriced here, but I'm not going to want the value on the other side either. I think the Mets will be a little overpriced.
Even with Greinke?
Yeah, because it's Syndergaard at home. Okay, and Greinke hasn't been as good on the road, and the Diamondbacks are playing really crappy ball right now. I mean, they were getting fortunate. When you have we talked about OPS on the and how good the Braves have been. Well, that's how bad the Diamondbacks have been. They're 28th in baseball in OPS. You can't sustain the record you have with that kind of lack of offensive production. You look at their lineup. Now you take Pollock out. This is a bad lineup. Okay, I mean, they've got a bunch of guys who hit 200 out there. They're going to start going backwards. I don't think there's much question about that. And they are right now.
All right, guys, that wraps up our baseball segment. We got one more segment to go. We're going to take a little quick break. When we come back, We're going to get a best bet from all three of us, see if we can build on that 11-7 record with the best bets over the last 6 weeks. We'll be back in a moment here for the Wager Talk podcast. Welcome back to the Wager Talk podcast. This is the home stretch. We're heading to the finish line. Best bets, 11-7 the last 6 weeks. Let's start with you, Ralph. You've got a best bet on Saturday. You're taking a look at the Seattle-Detroit game. What are you looking at?
You know what? It's one of those situations where, if you look at Wager Talk's first pitch each day, it has the home road breakdowns for all pitchers. And not that that's hard to find, but at an easy glance. And Felix Hernandez is one of those pitchers that has made 9 starts on the year. His 5 road starts, he has a 7.27 ERA. But at home in his 4 starts, a 3.86 ERA and a 1.16 whip. On the opposite side, you have Fulmer, who's got a road ERA approaching 5, and Detroit 4-13 their last 17 road games, getting outscored by 1.5 runs per game. I like Seattle with Felix Hernandez on Saturday.
Dave, we're going to go to you. You're going to take a look at that Arizona-New York Met game on Sunday. What are you looking at?
I think a good chance for a low-scoring game. Obviously check the weather and bullpens and stuff like that. So it's not an official selection, but Arizona's talked about their struggles offensively. I don't think that's changing. The Mets now minus Cespedes, that really cripples their offense to some extent. He's such a big, he's the big bat in that lineup. You get a good chance for this to be a 3-2 game. I think under is the way I'd be looking with the Greinke-Syndergaard matchup between the Diamondbacks and Mets.
Well, I'm going to go to that same game, Dave, and I like your thinking there with the under and talking about how inept Arizona has been recently. And to tell you how inept, the series that they just finished with Milwaukee, they scored 2 runs in each of the games. Then they had one game where they scored 4 runs against Washington, and then the 3 previous games to that, they scored 1 run in each game. Arizona is just not scoring any runs. They're going to be going up against Syndergaard. We talked about the home road dichotomy with Greinke. He's always pitched better at home than he has on the road. And I just think that right now, Arizona, this slump, I think, kind of goes in hand with the Dodgers, where they could have been just absolutely putting the season away. I think they got, maybe a little bit, fat and sassy with that big lead early in the season. And now it's snowballed into a major losing streak. This is a team that has lost. They've only got 1 win in their last, 8 games here. I think they're 1-7 last 8 games. So I got to go ahead and look at the Mets here at home for my best bet. So there you have it. You've got Ralph on Saturday with Seattle and King Felix. You've got Dave going with the under in the Mets Arizona game on Sunday. And in that same game, I'm taking the Mets on Sunday. That is it for this week, guys. I want to thank all of our guests this week, David Purdum, SIG Las Vegas. Also, thank my guys here in the studio, Dave Koken, Ralph Michaels, our man behind the booth, Mark Seidel. Of course, a big shout-out to Johnny Detroit, who gets us up and running on all of the social media outlets. And then, of course, you guys that take the time to listen to our podcast. We love you guys listening, love the comments you leave us on Twitter. We appreciate that. And I'm your host, Marco D'Angelo. Till next week, guys. Let's cash some tickets. Good luck.